and they all held their breath in awe of the demon who knocked on their door. The troll of Yom approaches like a storm.
This idea came into my mind after watching the Thors vs Askeladd's pirate scene in the anime, as he obliterates 30 odd men all without a sword and using perfect delicate prowess to incapacitate without killing. Askeladd's men aren't exactly the Yom's Vikings, who I will get into later, but they aren't inexperienced kids either, with Thors himself labeling them veterans. They are cold-blooded killers, and Thors dissects them as if they were children with wooden sticks.
Die! What the fuck?
Taking out 4 armed men within a few seconds with 1 punch and no armor, to launching the massive Bjorn, who can crush a man's head in 1 punch throughout the air, crashing into the other boat, to outsmarting the foxy Askeladd with his superior battle intelligence. This is also a non-prime Thors, having spent 15 years tending to animals instead of battlefields, which obviously implies his prime was even scarier. Now, for this video, I don't care about his philosophy, his desire to not use a blade. I only wish to scale his killing output at the peak of his abilities. The easiest way to scale Thors is through character and narrative statements, and the perfect man for that job is Thorkel the Tool. Whilst Yukimura is rather grounded in his expressions of humanity and philosophy, he takes extravagant leaps into the obscene for his fights and physical abilities of his characters. Thorkel is the most obvious in this sense, his historical counterpart being notably large, but clearly not as much of a demon as the Thorkel we know. Some of his most crazy feats include punching a running horse with Thorfinn on it so hard it launched into the air several feet, using obscenely large logs as bats to squish countless enemies. Equipped with a nasty hook, he wrestles a literal bear into submission, throwing a spear from over a kilometer away that reached half the speed of sound, and he can cut through multiple enemies in 1 swing, can keep up with Garm the Hellhound in a 1 vs 1, who also has the ability to dodge arrow fire at close range. He does all of this and more outside of his prime. Unk is about 50 during most of these feats, which naturally offers the idea that he is aging and therefore becoming weaker. A man reaches their prime physicality in terms of speed and raw strength from their late 20s to early 30s, meaning his prime would be stronger than all the feats shown in the manga. Why are Thorkel's feats important, you may ask? Well, it is stated by Thorkel himself that the only man to surpass his ability is Thors. He labels Thors the only man in the entire world to be stronger, a true warrior. Obviously for us and modern readers, this true warrior means something different from a perfect fighter, but Thorkel constantly misunderstands what Thors means by the phrase, so we can assume he means in the literal sense. We see the two clash as well during their primes, with Thors obliterating Thorkel's monstrous axe swing in a single blow, followed by a succinct punch to his chin, knocking a nearer prime Thorkel out in 1. So this allows us to go into scaling Thors with the assumption he can do all of these things Thorkel can, and much more. Berserk can be handled in tiers: humans, non-humans such as trolls and Darker and other magical creatures, apostles, and then untouchables like the God Hand. Thors would beat all the lesser humans, including Roderick, Azan, the Bakuraka, Judo, and Pippin. Unless he was trained and equipped to fight with Dragon Slayer, Thors would likely lose to most apostles, but due to his unrealistic raw strength surpassing human limitations, it is up for debate. We shall explore that later. So to begin, I have made a gauntlet for Thors of the Golden Age. It took a little while debating with friends to settle on who sits where on this scale, but ultimately I am satisfied with the placements. Do let me know if you think I'm wrong in the comments, and remember, not a single person on this list is weak or a pushover at all. In case you were the world's #1 Bazuso fan and feel his placement was very low, they're all on here because they're strong. As it goes, we start with Bazuso, someone Guts fought at a very young age of 15. Funnily enough, Bazuso scales similarly to Thorkel. He is known as the 30-man killer and killed a bear unarmed. So he is no joke, but a young Guts makes quick work of him regardless, only needing 2 direct hits to his armor to penetrate and finish. Guts uses the technique of attacking the opponent's weapon to weaken it, which is the reason he survives the swing to his head, and this method is literally used by Thors against Askeladd as well. I think it's safe to assume a warrior with as much experience as Thors would be able to use the same method against Bazuso, whilst also avoiding being hit directly, as Guts was much younger and inexperienced than Thors would be during his prime. Added to this, Thors beats 30 of Askeladd's men without taking a life, including a mushroom-amped Bjorn who is able to crush a man's skull with one punch, leading to the assumption if Thors wanted to kill the 30 he could have. We can also make the assumption that Thors is much faster and agile than Bazuso, who is weighed down by his thick armor. Speed feats for Thors can derive from the idea his speed was superior to a younger Thorkel, significantly outclassing him in their bout, and a much older Thorkel was equal to a prime athleticism Garm who can dodge close range arrow fire and quickly overwhelm Thorfinn, who can speed blitz Jomsvikings. Thorkel is slower than his prime against Garm, with the brain declining in reaction time after your 20s, so the implications are all there to assume Thors' speed is monstrous. As long as Thors is equipped with a sword, this 1 versus 1 should end in his victory, rather conclusively. Moving next to the strongest female warrior of Berserk, Casca. Casca is a lot stronger than people seem to give her credit for. Possessing incredulous agility, she can take on and kill multiple heavily armored men at once, even whilst on her period, proving her stamina and movements to be attuned highly. She is confirmed to be the 3rd strongest of the band, behind only Griffith and Guts, showing this multiple times. She can perform stunts such as entire flips over enemies in her fight with the Don after being shot by a poisoned arrow, using her speed, agility and precision to slice open his face. An exhausted and unexpecting Casca can even keep up with Silat, blocking and deflecting his insanely fast attacks, but eventually falls. So Casca certainly holds her own, a formidable opponent that poses a different threat to Thors than the tank type of Bazuso. However, the outcome remains the same, I believe, just a little bit trickier. Thors is not superhuman and cannot predict every attack, which means there are definitely openings for Casca to attack. This also married with the fact his Viking armor is significantly weaker than a typical knight. We are using his armor set when part of the Jomsvikings, which allows for more points to pierce or slice. There is more room to wiggle, but it ends the same. Thors was the exalted would-be successor of the Jomsvikings, the elitist of the elite, so him failing to predict agile moves and react accordingly seems out of the question. His raw strength would easily overwhelm Casca given his massive build and her female limitations, which a lot of the time matters not for Casca, as those she fights lacks her amazing skill. But Thors' sword skill is unmatched in the verse apart from maybe Snake, and with this skill, experience and power puts an end to Casca with little to no damage received. Griffith is an interesting one. He is superior to most in nearly everything he does. However, skills are suited to certain environments, and in a 1 versus 1, Griffith is at a disadvantage. Yes, he beat Guts when they were younger, but Guts was significantly weaker, battle-drained and immature, and fights in the chronological canon are much trickier to compare, as there are emotional, physical, environmental and narrative influence that dictate who wins which battle. Griffith is technically skilled and has talent, but his fighting feats are mediocre within the Golden Age. Him slicing Zod's arm off is probably the most impressive, considering it has been countless years since the Immortal had even been damaged, and obviously this comes with apostle endurance and defensive stat implications. However, he is knocked out in a single hit from Zod, unlike Guts who takes many blows. He is considered the top 2 strongest in the band, but his wisdom and tactical mind is definitely what carries him, along with the charisma overwhelming others, leading to statements of confidence in his ability, such as Judo believing Guts and Griffith were evenly matched, which was delusionally false. His speed is his main weapon, blitzing post-Bazuso Guts and being able to land precise shots effortlessly. This is what Thors would struggle against the most, as his slippery fighting technique is great at impact negation, easily moving Guts' sword out of the way, so even if his opponent is larger, he has a chance. Griffith would be able to succinctly analyze and adapt, needing to go for deadly blows, keeping his distance and finding a weakness. I believe Thors would certainly pick up injuries, but by the end, Thors crushes him similarly to the Guts rematch. There would be more clashes as both don't know the other's skill set, and if Griffith would get a clean slice on Thors' limb, there's no reason to assume he won't lose it, as a Viking armor is typically light, and Zod's endurance is definitely superior to Thors. But like the rest, Thors progresses to the next round, as Griffith simply lacks experience and power in comparison. Silat is like an amplified Casca. He does everything she can, but better, faster, and stronger, along with his own unique abilities of terrifying potency in Chakram and Urumi. Unfortunately for Silat, Guts instantly adapts, closes the distance, and defeats him. The weapons eviscerate lesser opponents such as the other two soldiers, but for someone as fast and quick thinking as Guts, the tools amount to not much. I do believe Thors has the ability to close down Silat, but just like Guts, even worse perhaps, will take significant hits from the Urumi, slicing his body up. This should not be an issue, however. His endurance is incredible, being able to take a volley of arrows, including one to the neck, and remain standing and cohesively interact with others for minutes after, where most would instantly die, and barely feeling a lethal slice from Prime Askeladd, who has been shown to cut an entire body in half through their armor during old age. Given his reaction time is comparable to Garm, who can dodge arrow fire, this also means closing the distance of Silat's medium range attacks should prove a small challenge. Thors would have to get past Urumi, and not being equipped with such a long sword as Guts, who was able to manipulate the environment to his benefit from it, would hinder his chances. I do believe for Thors to win this fight, he would need to accept a significant blow from the Urumi in exchange to close the distance to his sword length. With his speed, he could dodge the main strike to his face and allow the blades to wrap his arm, even gripping them and yanking forwards. His pain tolerance as an elite Viking is nearly unmatched, knowing that Thorkel can take a dagger thrust right through his hand without stopping his attack, and Thors is comparable. His strength is already established, scaling above Thorkel, so the moment Thors can grip something connected to Silat, it's over. If, like Guts, he switches weapons, it would not change the tide, as Thors' pressure would easily overwhelm Silat just like Guts did. So overall, I believe Thors wins this clash whilst taking on serious injuries, as Silat's arsenal effectively counters Thors' close-range fighting style. Boscogn is considered the strongest knight of the entire Tudor Empire. In terms of relative status, he easily equals or even surpasses that of Thors of the Jomsvikings. For a human, he is an absolute monster, towering over most in incredibly thick steel armor. Most research into typical knight versus Viking bouts ends with a general consensus of the knight's superiority, the armor and formal training trumping that of the Vikings. Obviously, Thors is no typical Viking, but Boscogn has some feats backing him up. Statements from a near-peak strength Golden Age Guts claims that Boscogn is strong, so much so that it is worse than the entire 100-man retinue he slew, implying that Boscogn would have no issue in beating them as well. He is able to cut through at least 5 armored men and their swords in one swing with his poleaxe, meaning the extended range is just as brutal compared to Thors' shorter sword. Thors' brawny strength is a significant factor, and we can assume he can cut through metal plating with his sword, thanks to Askeladd doing it with ease through a helm. However, Boscogn can easily contend with that, plus his insanely fast movement speeds whilst wearing full armor, to the point other soldiers cannot even see his weapon for how fast he is. I'm leaning more heavily in Boscogn's favour, as Thors lacks defensive abilities at the cost of being more agile, and Boscogn has seriously impressive statements despite the lack of feats. Assuming the fight is without horses, it may be a little closer, but I doubt his ferocity comes mainly through the advantage of horseback. He has little chance against Prime Golden Age Guts. Anything before Guts killed 100 men is most likely a Thors win, but Guts has taken hits from both Wild and Zod, who can launch entire tree trunks and punch holes through castles, and is able to keep fighting. He killed 100 armed men in a weaker form and speed blitzes most soldiers he fights, and was able to react to crossbow fire, which are faster than bows. Thors has been shown to have elite stamina, rowing with the effectiveness of 4 grown men without losing any breath. Guts is the poster boy for tenacious stamina, being battered by far superior fighters and remaining conscious. Guts beats every single person on this list as well, and just scales too far beyond what Thors is capable of. He is of a different nature, the strongest human there ever has been in Berserk, and can adjust and adapt to anything, even dealing significant damage to many apostles during the eclipse, whilst unarmored. His pain tolerance, power output, and speed would be too much for Thors to deal with, given he is susceptible to being caught out, such as the sneak attack from Askeladd at the start of their fight. If Thors landed a clean hit on Guts, it would certainly cause serious damage. His power is outrageous, but Guts is so fast and dangerous himself that Thors would fail to get chances like that, I think, given Guts would obviously be swinging his blade as well, which is a lot longer than what Thors is shown to wield. I do believe Thors has the capability to wield Dragon Slayer, given his strength and stamina feats are comparable to Thorkel, who can punch a horse that weighs roughly 450 kilograms off the ground, and Dragon Slayer estimates sit around 172 kilograms. If he became fully accustomed to it, I think he'd scale above Serpico, even with the cloak and windsword, as Dragon Slayer is practically a magical weapon in itself. Thors would do similarly to Guts in the Eclipse if he was also bloodlusted, but his size would most likely be a cause of his downfall, given Guts has agility to dodge via acrobatics that Thors probably does not have, possessing more linear agility such as tremendous jumps. In some versions, Thorkel actually states Thors was easily stronger than him, so once again his monstrous feats must be considered, such as Thorkel tossing a boulder calculated to be roughly 2,500 kilograms from above his head. Now Thors has crazy output already, he could mow down monsters just like Guts can do against the trolls, but given his limited arsenal such as no arm cannon, it might leave him unprepared fully. There's way more to discuss, but I have not got the time, so like and subscribe. Maybe I'll create a magical beast gauntlet for Thors in the future, but until the next one, peace out.